Welcome back to ADSR and MassiveSynthTutorials.com. And if you haven't gotten yourself subscribed to our YouTube channel, if you want to, you can. It's at www.youtube.com/ADSRtuts. So this is part 2 of this month's little series about it's titled How to Make Bigger and Better Wobbles, but we're kind of just going over like some general sound design things. And the first video in last week's segment, we made a wobble and massive from scratch, and you can check that out. Links in the description to that. And then this week I'm going to go over some third-party processing ideas that I use on things like big basses, wobbles, anything for electro house, dub techno, all that stuff. It's pretty applicable. So here's the sound that we had from last week. So that's there in the green right there. And that was the wobble that we made using Massive. And when I after I make a sound or I have like a cool groove going and I'm making something into a song or a production, the first thing I'm thinking of is I just want to get the sound and the progression down, and then later I can kind of tweak sounds. Because for me personally, I can get lost in the world of sound design and then a song will never get done. So first thing I usually do is I kind of separate in my mind. I have to separate two different types of effects and plugins. I have the ones that I call just like, the cleanup plugins are for the mix, which you just use to make the sound fit in your mix better. And then I have the effects that I look at that are, how can I make the sound bigger? Does it need to be bigger in conjunction with the other elements of the mix? So let's say this was in the drop of a song. Let's say I was using that sound in a drop and it was the main sound. Well, then the first thing I'm going to do is let's clean it up. Let's take out the frequencies that we don't need using EQ. Let's maybe add some space with like an aux send or something, or get a compressor. Or in the realm of EDM dubstep, do I have room for the kick? Because it's a bass. If it's a bass drop, do I have room for the kick to come through? So right now when I play it, the kick and the wobble are fighting for some of those lower frequencies. Like right now I have the wobble pretty low, but if I turn it up a little bit higher, so right now I'm at negative 6 even. Let's go negative 5.5, which is 5.5 dBs below where most faders will start you out at in Unity. So if I play this, and you'll see I wasn't nearly clipping over here or anything like that. So everything's pretty quiet, but they're kind of fighting and struggling for the frequencies that they share. And that's because if I open up Massive, you'll see I have some of the oscillators down tuned to negative 24, negative 12, and negative 24, which is getting pretty low. None of them are like pure sine waves or anything, which would definitely conflict with a kick. But that's getting low enough to where I'm going to want to carve out some frequencies, and I didn't do that in Massive. So, it might, everything's I actually boosted some of the highs, I think, so. I actually had a couple of the effects bypassed. I want those on, so. All right, so that's sound. Sorry about that. But so first thing I'm gonna do is I have some presets, plugins, not presets, but plugins on here, so you don't have to go through me opening them. So this is just a basic EQ, and I'll recall default. So you can use it. Every DAW pretty much has this, whether you're in Ableton, Cubase, Pro Tools, Logic. This is just comes with Logic. I like using this a lot for doing little cuts and boosts if I'm just cleaning up a sound. So you'll notice that I have it on resolution of high. It helps deal with phasing issues if you have a lot of EQ plugins running. But one of my favorite features about this EQ is you can click on Analyzer. And then I can see visually where all the frequencies are going, which is really helpful if I'm on headphones or, I might not have the best monitor setup or something. So if I opened up a EQ let me just copy this over to my kick. So if I open up an EQ on my kick and turn the analyzer on. So a lot of peaks between 50 and 100. Actually, I may even take out just a bit of that. So between 50 and 200 is kind of where the attack of that kick drum is living. So I'm going to now open up the EQ I just put on my Wobble and see how there's a lot going on between 50 and maybe about 150. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of that out. And this is just kind of to taste whatever your mix calls for. But right now, I just took a little bit out above 50. So now between 50 and 100 is where the kick actually has room to breathe. And that's where the frequencies will open up. You're probably not going to be able to hear that too well on YouTube. But so I'm kind of going down to around 70 hertz. That's where I'm cutting. Just to give it a little bit more breath. And if I had a sub bass in here, which we're going over next week, is layering, how to get even bigger wobbles by layering. I would probably cut a little bit more, but for right now it's fine. There's a plugin I really like called Sausage Fattener, and it's basically let me get this open too. It's basically a saturator, a little bit of a distorter, I think, and a limiter all in one. So if you don't have the Sausage Fattener, it's made by a company called Data Life or Data Life. I think Data Life. But you can achieve similar effects with a good saturating plugin, which most DAWs have. So you could probably use phase distortion or just distortion 2 in Logic. Sausage Fattener is pretty inexpensive. I think it goes for like under $40. So it's not bad, and it's one of those plugins where it's made with like 2 knobs, and it's one of those things where let me get that out of the way of here, the mix. So it's one of those things where if you bump it up too much, like his face changes, if you didn't know that. It gets angry. But it's one of those things that you could really just have too much of on. And so right now I'm going to play it and tweak a little bit of it. So it's a subtle change, but the thing to look for is it's your ears will perceive it as being louder, but I'm worrying about, is it changing my fader levels a lot? So here it is with it on. So I'm up just near -15, and then with it on, it's basically, see how there's a limiter going on somewhere behind that knob? It's kind of making it, it's not making the peaks in between the LFO that's happening in massive, which is what's creating the wobble. It's keeping those peaks and those ceilings and the floors at a similar volume, which is where the limiting's happening. So, I mean, here I'll unsolo this and play it. So that's what we got so far. So next thing that you can apply to pretty much just to get your mixes tighter with any EDM genre, or even I'll use it a lot in like a pop song. I'll maybe like duplicate a guitar and then have one panned out wider and sidechain. But with anything that's synth heavy, it's really cool to have a sidechain effect going, which you can do by setting up a ghost track. Like you could set up another one of these kick tracks, copy these kicks, mute the output of that track, and then route that to a bus, and then open up a compressor on the track that you want to sidechain, like this Wobble, and then a lot of plugins will have a keychain input, which just means you, instead of where the plugin lets you choose that bus that you created as what's feeding the sound source instead of the track. And so that's one way that you can do it. Like I'll show you with their compressor in Logic. So it says sidechain, and see how I can select the buses that I already have set up that I'll show you later, which aren't for sidechain, but you could make one of your buses what's feeding the information in that track. That's one way to set it up, and that's how I did it for a while. And then it was kind of hard to get. I didn't like having a lot of ghost tracks because I don't use the same. I never use the same sidechain sidechaining effect on multiple parts. So maybe for my bass part it'll all be the same, but the sub always had a different one, or like any air effects, white noise effects, synth leads. So it got pretty tedious having tons of ghost tracks on my arrange window in Logic, and got a little bit confusing. So when I discovered there's a couple tools out there that do it, and they do it really well. This one is called the LFO tool. It's made by like deadmau5 and under the label name of Exifer Records. It is a great tool, not just for sidechain. You have all these crazy presets. So like here's a tremolo. There's just a boatload of sweeps. Everything you want. So they do have this section called Sidechain, and then here it is. So there's the first preset's pretty light, and then if I use this one, see how this is the attack, it gets more. So that was a good one for this one right here. This one would be a good one for sub bass. So see how different shapes are conducive to different sounds in your mix. So that's why I like using a tool like this. And I know some purists will be like, oh, you got to use the compression and all that. But I like using a tool like this a lot. I like the LFO tool because it's just, you can do a lot of other things to it. But I think this one costs, I think it's fairly expensive. I'm not sure. I know it's more than 50. I forget exactly, but I just downloaded the demo to this. I don't actually own this, but it's made by Cable Guys, which is put really small there, and it's endorsed by Nicky Romero. But Cable Guys, they put out some great plugins, and this one's really simple. Like, you can't draw anything in yourself. Wrong one. So with the LFO tool, I can take these points and I can make any shape. I can double click and add new points as I need. So you can draw in your own waveforms. But with the Nicky Romero one, the Kickstart, you just have these presets to choose from, and they're named like Free Punch, Classic Change, Nice and Tight, Sub Bass. So see how the beginning's carved out. I did hear on a forum when I was looking into this that the next update, they will allow you to draw your own curves, and if that's the case, it's just quick and easy to get a good sidechain. So this is the mix knob. So and basically you can see visually what's happening with sidechain compression, which is cool. Here's the attack of your note, and it's pulling the audio down, which gives your kick room to breathe, which is what creates that kind of, people describe it as a suction effect. Alright, so we'll just keep Kickstart on instead of LFO tool for now. So now we have the EQ, which is carving out a little bit the lows. We have the sausage fattener, which is just limiting the sound and keeping all the peaks and kind of the low values the same volume. And then we have Kickstart, which is our sidechain compression. And then another thing that we can do, I'll go over wow in a second, but another thing I like doing is, what I'll do is even on a bass sound, I'll make a bus, an aux send, and then I'll send it and pan it. Because if you think about the bass, when you have a bass drop, it's just up the center and it's with the kick. Well, then what I'll do is I'll put some random processing on it to kind of make it stand out from the signal I'm splitting and panning. If I solo just this aux send and hit play, you'll hear that it's out to the right all the way, and these are the effects that are on it. So I'm going to solo that and hit play. So you can hear that that's different from the actual wobble sound we have. And what I did was I cut out a lot of the lows. I put a phase distorter on it. Put the mix up, anywhere to taste. And then I have a really slight reverb on it. And then I put a plugin called Wow 2, which is a great plugin for making it's just a great filtering plugin, basically, that makes you can create tons of stuff with it. You can create vowels, you can create rhythmic gated effects. There's a lot, but that's what's going on. And then I put the LFO tool on that because I would have put Kickstart on it if I owned Kickstart, but I don't. So even for this demo, it only lets me use one instance. So, but I put that on, so it's sidechaining all that too. So I did that group, which is out towards the right, and then I made another aux send, another bus, which is going out towards the left. And I put the LFO tool on it, same as I did on this bus, the same value. And then I put a different effect on it. I put FabFilter Saturn, which is just a distortion product. A distortion plugin. But you see how it said 8-bit. It's just like an 8-bit thing. So I could take something that pretty much every DAW has. I'll turn that one off. So, and I'll just get a bit crusher. And then it's on 8-bit, and I can downsample a little bit. And I'll solo this. So you can hear it start to take on like it's like almost a throat noise going on. So then you can do that same effect with a bit crusher. Some saturators have bit crushing. If you don't have a good bit crusher, Logic has a pretty good one. I'm not sure if every DAW does, but Tone Boosters has a good free one called Time Machine, and it lets you do different bit points just like this does, and it's a good one if you need a good if you're looking to get one. So that's the whole sound with all the processing on it. The EQ, which is taking out some of the lows, the sausage fattener, which is limiting and adding a little bit of harmonic saturation to it, and then Kickstart, which is our sidechain compression basically. And then we have two aux sends going left and right with their own chain of effects, so they're a different sound, so the ear perceives it as a different sound source. That's important when you're doing those splits like that. Otherwise, it's just like doubling a synth track or doubling something. It's not different to the ear, so it doesn't sound any bigger. So let's remove that and that, and I'm gonna play everything turned off, and I'm gonna turn on everything slowly. So yeah, that's kind of how I approach third-party outside processing once I get a really cool sound I like in Massive. And again, first thing I'm doing is looking at how I can clean up the sound and make it fit in the mix, and then where exactly does this sound fit into the mix? Is it a supporting instrument? Is it the instrument that everyone needs to hear the loudest? What's going on? And then after I have that kind of taken care of with EQs, compression, maybe a little bit of reverb to add space, and panning, what I'll then do is, okay, if this is the main instrument, like it would be in a big bass drop, how do I make it interesting and unique? Because we took time in Massive in last week's tutorial to make the wobble stand out a little bit and not make it sound like that wobble that we've all heard too many times. And then if you use that approach in your sound design and you use that same approach in your effects chain, you're going to get a sound that someone hasn't necessarily heard before, which is kind of really all you can go for when you're doing a dubstep genre and you want to be unique, or you're doing electro house or whatever it may be. So yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you guys got something useful out of this, and stay tuned for next week's tutorial, finishing up this 3-part series. I'm going to be layering in some sounds with this that complement the wobble sound we made in the first part. And yeah, so if you have any questions, comments, or anything, let me know. And head on over to massivesynthtutorials.com for a lot of other great tutorials. And yeah, hope to see you soon.